goes by. So, first thing, like I always like to do is thank everyone for coming and thanking our sponsors, which is Pro Photo.
Getting out.
Pro
The
Photo.
ringer didn't work. Can I get out here, please?
We got to mute everyone else for a moment. There she comes. Erie. Great. So thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate it very much. So I want to thank our sponsors who've been with us for a long time: Pro Photo Daily, American Photography, Archive Magazine, Photo Shelter, and Epson. Tonight we have two terrific presenters. I'm so thrilled to have them. Their bodies of work are really, really wonderful. So we have Deborah Feingold, and to start us off, we have Lawrence Wheatman. Lawrence?
Yes. Okay. Are we ready? Are we ready? Let's see if this works. I'm going to be using my right. I need to. Oh gosh, so many things to do. I did 2 presentations in the last month like this, but not of my own, of other people's, and it certainly seemed like it made more sense to do it in. Oh gosh. Sorry. In whatever this called, Keynote, rather than other ways. And that Keynote has I can use my phone to do a remote control. Self-playing, change the presentation to normal. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm just leaving it. Okay, fine. So then we're just doing it. Here we go. I am going to just let this play. I have it set for 3.5 seconds a slide, but there's a lot
Lawrence,
of slides.
share the screen.
Oh, gosh. So many things to get right. Okay, back here and then play. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to let it play. And we're going to have the time to have conversation afterwards, right? So then I can explain some of this nonsense. Because when Deborah and I spoke about this, and it seemed like we had so much in common, and it just so happened that exactly 20 years ago, I had a 20-year retrospective. So this is working out to be exactly a 40-year retrospective. And so I'm just showing off stuff I did back in the 80s and 90s. Just very quickly, here's just less than a minute of this stuff. This is a self-portrait, by the way. This one wound up in 4 museums, which was bizarre, considering we didn't plan anything like that to happen. And this is the oldest picture that I have of my own. I took about 10 years old from a series we'll talk about. My aim was, when I started putting this together, was to show 1 to 3 pieces from each series that I had over this period of time. And when I finished, I had something like 600 pieces, and that wasn't going to work. I didn't realize until this week putting this together how prolific I've been over these years. This is the opening night of the Born in the USA tour, the first night that Springsteen ever made money. And I got to take pictures of that when nobody else did, because I knew the guys. Skipping 15 years here, because there was a time when storing digital files was so bloody expensive, $1,000 a gigabyte, not a terabyte, a gigabyte. And so when I finished a project, I most commonly would delete the files once I had a print. By the way, in case there's anything you wanted to make note of to talk about later, some of the slides have numbers on the bottom showing the page numbers, so you can get a hint of approximately where we are. And I have to say how weird it is to be showing my own work after showing other people's work for all this time.
So Larry, just a question.
Yeah.
What made you transition
Yep.
from shooting people to shooting, plants and flowers, still lives?
Well, flowers came to me for the simple reason that early on, somebody that I very much respect and still am in touch with said, you should never take pictures. A rule is you should never take pictures of flowers because there's too many pictures of flowers already. And some 20 years after he said that, I had the conversation in front of my students. He happened to be there. He was there. And I said, oh, and by the way, Wayne says, you shouldn't take pictures of flowers, blah, blah, blah. He said, yeah, I think I did say that, but that was ridiculous. And then I started taking pictures of flowers with a vengeance. But it's not, it's not really like that I focus on flowers or focus on people or focus on anything. What I focus on is making images, and I'm not good with a brush, I'm not good with a pencil, but the way I'm teaching at NYU is I start off every semester in the first session, I say, I'm not here to make you into a technician, I'm here to show you how to use a camera as a paintbrush. And that's what I've been doing from the beginning with my own stuff. Something that you may have noticed in those first images that were all strictly analog is that I manipulated the heck out of the stuff. And everything I'm doing digitally is I look for tools that can get me to be able to do the things that I used to do in the darkroom. So there was no choice to do this or do that. And also, it should be noted too, I started off as a musician, and I was quite successful as that at putting food on the table for some years. But then I started writing, and the more music I wrote, the less money I made. I did wind up getting into getting produced by. I shared my producer with Eric Clapton for a while until he died, and so I was right on the verge of being the rock star, I guess. But during that time from the time I started writing, I wound up picking up the camera just to support myself with music. And I fell into a job where I was shooting every week for Pierre Cardin doing fashion. This came out of nowhere, and I had no capability to do this well. And yet I did it every single week for a year. My pictures were in full page ads in the New York Times Sunday magazine. And even though I always got the New York Times for many, many years, I got the paper edition, that of course when it was no other option. And I never even thought of keeping those images, those pages. I never thought of tearing them out because I was a musician. This was my job, was to take pictures. This is how I put food on the table. Yeah, never. It took me. I had already been teaching at the Board of Education, Department of Education. I did a volunteer position there for 35 years, and then overlapped. I was recruited from NYU to teach there, and I've been there for 32. But it was only about 5 or 8, maybe at the most 10 years ago, that I realized A, I was a teacher, or B, that I was an artist. I was able to do the music because I bought an instrument and learned how to play it. That didn't make me an artist. I was able to do this stuff because I had a camera, and I was excited by my mentors, living and dead, Man Ray probably being the most powerful one in my life. And I just love the idea of playing, of experimenting, of doing things wrong so that maybe they would come out right. And I guess I was very lucky a lot. Just knowing the fact that, I could experiment in whether it was the darkroom or digitally, and no matter how bad the results might come out, nobody would get hurt. It wasn't like I was a doctor or something. So that the play made life exciting and fun, And then there's, this stuff, which is really just all nature. There's a whole bunch of things that I took out that just because there were way too many pictures in here. Primarily manipulations that I so much enjoy doing.
Yeah, how did that come for you, Larry?
Well, it started in the darkroom. It started with I had a medium format, no, a large format enlarger. So I had a 4x5 enlarger that obviously adapted to being able to do 35 and medium format. And just having that big ass enlarger made it possible for me to tape negatives together, or drape them down, holding them or twisting the negatives and making prints out of those twisted negatives. And I was able to get really unique stuff out of that. Once we started, I was an early adoptee of digital in the sense that I was doing what we then called analog capture. So I was shooting on film, and I'd have the film processed normally, but then the next step would be straight to scanning the film. So this was, for weddings, for portrait sittings, for commercial work, whatever, just having the film scanned right away onto CDs. And then I would work from there. That was back in the time when you really could only have one picture on the on the computer at a time, because I was doing lots of magazine covers and such, advertising things, or CD covers, and those files were rarely less than a gigabyte, or up in the range of a gigabyte. And this is back in the time when a 1 gigabyte hard drive was insanely expensive. Eventually we did get the jazz drive, so it suddenly dropped from whatever it was to $100 a gigabyte, but that was a gigabyte, not a terabyte, a gigabyte. And so I literally would have to stretch one magazine cover sometimes over 2 of those, or sometimes 3 of those jazz drives, just to be able to store it for a little while. And
so, Larry, when you look at this work and you see the evolution from where you started to where you are, manipulating these images, what does that make you feel? From going to those, little butterflies and leaves to these images and manipulating them. That's a huge journey.
It doesn't feel like a huge journey at all. Not at all. I can suggest that I can liken it to it's a huge journey to go from eating carrots on one day and broccoli on another. It's it's a different color. I don't see it as a huge journey at all.
But it came naturally for you.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah, that's really what I was going for there.
Yeah. With performance, because I know so many musicians, because I was playing for so long. This is Arno. You've heard him play a million times without knowing it from the 50s on. I wound up doing lots of these things, just getting free tickets in exchange for a print that I made from the night. Oh, somebody raised their hand.
Yes, what's the question?
What's the question?
We have, well, I just got a flash that somebody raised their hand.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
If there was something, you can put a question in the chat room if you'd like.
Guess not.
This ticket I paid for. But I did spend time backstage with Ringo Starr's All-Star Review, and that was quite the experience. The best single cover band of all time, because obviously the best players on stage, but the voice was always the original voice. and so sweet backstage. You would think that you would be able to cut the ego with a knife, but everybody was just people. It was really sweet. I was on tour for a while with U2, not as a player, but as I was hired as a photographer, but I quickly became the head roadie because there was none. And they were moving the second largest stage that had ever been moved. It was designed to take 36 hours to assemble. And from the time I wound up being elected as the head roadie to the time the doors were opening was something like 16 hours. So there were some tough decisions that we had to make. We had to unload, first of all, there was something between 17 and 26 tractor trailers.
What year was that?
In the 80s, mid 80s, I guess.
Joshua.
The Joshua Tree Tour. But none of that, I just realized that none of those pictures are in here. With Springsteen, the way I was able to take those pictures was because Clarence came over the house first, and he picked up my camera bag, brought it with him backstage. Then my seats were with the family. So Bruce's parents were behind me, Patty's parents were in front of me, and I was sitting next to Clarence's brother. His folks were on my left side. And then Clarence, before the show, comes out to say hello and drops the camera bag in my lap. And so I was able to sit there amongst the family. The whole band's family was all around. It was just the band's family was in the section. And I was his fit model for 27 years.
Oh, there he is.
Sorry?
And how long do you work with an image, Larry? I mean, generally.
Well, in a darkroom, it could take days to do one, but these typically I'm doing 3 in an hour when I'm into it.
Really?
And that was something that was quite the eye opener in putting this together, was because especially since the virus started, and even before, I would make an image and then I'd post it, and then I'd make the next image that was part of that series and then post that. If I made another image that wasn't part of that series, then it would go on hold. But then so that the idea being that rather than putting them up on gallery walls, I was, pumping them out one at a time, Facebook or what have you, which all came from, Dan Burkholder, the name at least. Yeah, I mean, he's, I call him the teacher's teacher, and he was a fellow that, as far as I know, coined the phrase iPhoneography. And this was back, I think, when iPhone 3 came out, which would have been the second one because there was no 2. And he talked about how he would use the phone and it was after apps came out, because apps weren't there in the beginning. And he would use the phone and then to take a picture of something, and then use an app to do something to the picture, to alter it. And then he'd post it, so that when he started walking away from the thing he took the picture of, more people had seen that picture than would have perhaps seen it if it was in the gallery for a month. And the concept of that, since I was a member of the Soho Photo Gallery for 35 years, I know that was probably true right from the outset, because we sitting at the gallery just to keep it open, some days would go by where not a single person would walk in, and even a busy day might only be 12 or 15 people, assuming a tour bus didn't show up. So the possibility that 15 minutes after you walk away from what you took the picture of, but you've already posted the picture, that more people would see it before you got 100 feet away than would have in a gallery, that was an exciting prospect for me. And that made me, before that, I'd had the original iPhone, and I never took a picture with it as far as I can recall. And it was only after that conversation with Dan that I was like, oh yeah, okay, let me try this out. And It's funny, in the app world, if you haven't investigated what's available for iPhone or for anything, for any kind of modern camera, a modern phone camera, or image and in general, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of apps. Oddly enough, my favorite ones are the free ones. And not because, just because those seem to be the more functional ones and the ones that actually serve better. And I'm always, one of the first things I'm always checking when I'm checking out a new app is what is the output? Because something that many of the apps do, whether they're free or paid, is that in the output, they're not the full size file anymore. They've shrunk it down to 1/10 its size. You can't tell when you're looking on the phone or looking on the iPad. It's only when you look at the information of the file that you find that out. And so obviously they're useless in them, or useless in the sense of, for my purposes, which is still, although it's less so now. And when I say now,
Where
I
are
mean,
these images, Larry? That mountain.
I have a huge series of that I call peeking through windows, which is what this one is, for example, where I'm on a train, or I'm on the subway, or I'm in walking the street and looking into a shop window or a restaurant and taking pictures. And the ones that you saw, the mountains, were shooting out of an airplane.
Wow. So when you take the images and you come back right over a period of time, what makes you play with this one, don't play with that one? What's the determining factor for you?
It's what attracts me to that particular one. I mean, back in the old days, especially when I was doing people or to the weddings or fashion, my thought was, and the way I taught was, that film is cheap. Failing, especially a paid job, is bad. And but just shoot a lot of film, because then there's a better chance that you have a better shot. At this point, though, it's really rare I push the button more than twice. It's far more common I'll push the button once, and I usually, when I do push it twice, it's rare that the second one do I like better than the first. And I think that's probably the whole thing. I mean, was it Gladwell? Malcolm Gladwell talked about, and actually the first one to say this was Cartier-Bresson, who, okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
So we can go back to this, of course. Stop share, there we go. Now I want to see you guys better. Bring you front. Hi, everybody. Now I can see people.
And everyone should know that it's Larry's birthday today.
Hey, brother Vic is here. Hooray. And one of the things that Cartier-Bresson said was that your first 10,000 pictures are your worst. Now, he said that some years ago, but meanwhile, Malcolm Gladwell, about 10 years ago, wrote his book, I can't remember the name of it, but where he talks about, the first thing he talks about in the first pages, in the first chapter, is how all the great athletes of the world are born in January, February, or March. And it's like, how could that be? How could that be? Well, it's because in most cultures, if you're going into the first grade, it depends on, when you first enter school, it depends on what grade you're going into. You're going into the first grade. If you're born on December 31st, you're in one grade. If you're born on January 1st, you're in another grade. And so, of course, the person that's who's born January 1st, they are going to be older than pretty much everybody else in the class. So, of course, they are going to be larger. And so then, of course, they are going to get rewarded for for being better at sports than the person that was born, that's the same grade, that was born December 31st. He talks greatly in that the next chapter, I think it was the next chapter, about the Beatles, how they wound up being as great as they were because they got that gig in Hamburg. And in that gig, they were forced to play from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. with very short breaks. And so they got in their 10,000 hours, as he insisted, was 10,000 was the magic number, to get as great as they were. And I guess that's happened with me, and it probably happens with most photographers who are taking pictures a lot, is that there comes a point where I no longer needed to take 50 pictures or 100 pictures or 1,000 pictures to get one I loved. It happens far more often than I'm taking one and I love it, or I get back and I find that it's quite mediocre and I just ditch it.
Okay.
In the case of being casual rather than actually doing a job.
And so what's the next issue for you? What's the next project you're playing with?
Oh, keeping up on this stuff. I mean, something that was revealed to me so severely is that you noticed in that one of those first slides, I said, we're skipping the next 15 years. I did that quick thing of the first 20 years. And then we're skipping the next 15 years. And the reason why I had to skip the next 15 years is because we didn't really have, as you might recall, we didn't really have any way to organize photos in the digital photos, not in the same way as we could paper or photos or negatives, where we had file cabinets, etc. I mean, the only thing we had was the capability to use files on the computer, but in terms of keeping them organized in some systematic way, as we can now in Photos or in Lightroom or that sort of thing, that didn't exist until Steve Jobs came out with Aperture, which was the first. It was the application that nobody asked for, no photographer ever asked for, but everybody needed. And I was a very early adoptee of Aperture. As you know, Adobe copied that very, very closely. And in my opinion, it took Adobe like 5 or 8 years before Lightroom became better than Aperture. But Apple, for whatever reasons, gave up on Lightroom, even though it was a better program out of the box than Lightroom was. It took Lightroom years to get that good. So when when Aperture was announced that, well, we're not going to be renewing that, so get ready, I wound up going to a couple of other programs along the way. I can't remember right now. I think Picasa might have been one. I'm not sure. Google's Picasa was one. And then eventually going to Lightroom, never really liking Lightroom, but I stuck with it anyway for some years. And then Photos, Apple Photos came. Oh no, iPhoto came along first, and oh, this looks interesting. It wound up being pretty awful. It was okay as long as your catalog was small, but as soon as you started a big catalog, it became ridiculous to try to work with. And then when now Photos, I mean, I don't know, I can tell you, I probably have 20,000 pictures that are just in Photos just from the past 5 or 7 years. So the organization is there, but everything in between, I can't open those Aperture files. I can't open the iPhoto files without, I have to go into a closet and pull out an old computer and to be able to open those files and be able to transfer that data over. Probably the same thing, hopefully the same thing will be true with Aperture, but I think we call this data creep.
There you go. Well, so that's all great. I have to tell you, everybody in the chat room is loving your work, Larry.
Oh, I haven't looked. I gotta look. I want to see what they're saying about me. Kenny, I see you, Mr. Primus.
Yeah.
There's a man, you know the theme to MASH. He was in the original movie MASH. You don't mind if I talk about this, do you? And he's the man who sang the song, "Suicide is Painless," the theme song for MASH. He was the first man to sing it. He sang it, what was it, about 2 hours after it was written, something like that? Am I right? The next day? Okay. And you can unmute yourself, Kenny. You know how to talk. You've seen this guy on Broadway. He holds the record. Do you still hold the record for Broadway? I'm sorry to take this side. I just love this guy so much. He holds the record for having been on Broadway in the same role continuously for more performances than anybody else in history.
Well, there you go. We didn't know that. But Larry, I got to tell you, I really, really appreciate you coming on and showing us your work and the history of so much of the nuances of your journey is really very, very fascinating. So
I just want to say one thing. I've learned that I'm a born teacher. Victor is my brother here. He probably will disagree with me, but because he disagrees with everything I say. But I first came to the realization that my dad was a born teacher, something that I never got to tell him because he passed years before I realized that about him. And so I feel free to send me any messages you want in the chat or otherwise to be in touch, because I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Great. And take a class with Larry at NYU.
Okay. As soon as we start up again, the studio arts are dead right now.
We'll so what we'll do is we'll take a quick little break. We'll get Deborah all set up. Again, Larry, thank you again. Happy birthday. And let's just give it 2 minutes or so and we'll have Deb up and off we go. Thanks, Larry.
You bet. Thank you. Frank, you're wonderful. I love what you're doing here.
No, it's something that we a little bit of history for some of the folks who haven't been with us before. We've been doing this for 6 years, and all photographers are invited to present, and it's just a way to get some exposure and inspire other folks. And it's a perfect way to just mention. Next week we're doing 3 nights, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, with photographers who have just come back or are still in Ukraine.
Wow.
So that promises to be powerful. But I give you now, everybody, Deborah Feingold. She is really a wonderful person that I've just met. And her work will speak for itself. You're on, Deb.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to share my life story with everybody.
Yeah.
Should I just go right into it?
Yeah. Give us a little bit of background, Deb. A little bit on your journey, and just go right into it. Yes.
Well, that's sort of what the presentation is. It's the journey.
Great.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to share screen and do this and this. Okay.
There you go, Deb.
Yep.
Perfect.
Good. So it's not the beginning of me being born. I'm older than that. But it's the beginning, my first, well, I guess it was my first job. It's as a photo editor, but no, I loved photographs. And I just love this photo of me putting the little corners on and putting them in the photo albums. But photo albums really affected, I think when I look back at my work, I think that looking at the photos that were in my own home of my mom and my dad, they really inspired me. And my mom was an identical twin. And these pictures, they just sort of stuck with me because I am a portraiturist. That's what I've always done, and these images really made an impression on me very, very early on. And so it wouldn't be a surprise that, Irving Penn, Avedon, that work really resonated with me. That's my dad and his dad. Okay, so just a really brief back history. I was born in Cranston, Rhode Island, and I lived there till I went to college, I think at 16 or 17. And I went to college wanting to be an actress, but that was sort of short-lived. Photography had always been a hobby. When I was 12 years old, my dad had an enlarger in a little dark room in the basement, and he taught me how to develop negatives and how to print. So it always had been, as we said back in the day, a hobby, something I did because I loved doing it. When I went to college in Boston, I went to Emerson, and I took photo 101. And the teacher gave us as an assignment that we were to photograph something in as many different ways as we could. So I took my Army and Navy. Oh, what is that, me?
No, I don't know. No, it'll go away.
Okay, I'm all plugged in. So I took my coat and I just started photographing it. And when everyone submitted their photos and showed them to the class, I was so embarrassed by what I'd done, you know, sort of making theater out of it. And, you know, they had done like macro picture, you know, gone in really close and very graphic. And, you know, I made my jacket come alive. And I remember feeling so embarrassed, and he was floored by what I had done. And it probably was the first time in my life where I felt connected to someone, to this particular teacher, that I felt maybe kind of understood in a very quiet, personal way. And felt like I was given permission that day to just kind of trust myself a little bit, which I was always very shy and very pretty insecure.
So Deb, I mean, that's a huge moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was so huge that when I published my book, I thanked him in my book.
And what's
You
his
know,
name? And are you still in contact with him?
I was, up until a couple of years ago. He was a very strange photographer, but he was a great, very avant-garde. It's hard to explain what he did. His name was Stephen Chips. But I graduated college and kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. But so up until then, I had on my own created workshops for young adults with learning disabilities. I spent a summer during college in Monticello, New York, teaching. It was a camp for, I'm trying to be appropriate, children that had varying degrees of, I don't know what the word is, a lot of autism on the spectrum. And I taught photography there. I taught to senior citizens. I would always sort of create programs because I wanted to share the love that I had for photography with them. So it wasn't to be a photographer, it was to share the joy that photography personally gave me, and to sort of try to share that and inspire other people. So after I graduate,
where were you with your career?
I didn't hear you, say it again.
Where were you with your career at that point?
I was the 70s. I was a hippie. It's
Okay.
like, yeah, I was just taking photos. But, you know, I was in Cambridge, Mass, and I belonged to a photo co-op, and substitute teaching for cash, waitressing, you know, for money. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was taking pictures all the time, and I was really, you know, it was a different time for those of us that lived during the early 70s. So anyway, I graduated college, and I worked in a camera store the whole time, and that was pretty much what my focus was. I had a dark room in wherever I lived. I had it in my bedroom during college. You know, it was just something I felt really passionate about. So I got a job on a grant teaching photography at a detention center. That's what it was called then, for young adults. And my office was one of the cells. So I was with the kids there. And I just tried to use photography on the assignments that I would give them. It would be to help them engage with each other in a non-aggressive way. It was to help them with very basic skills, you know, reading. We would read a story and then we would act it out and photograph it and make a little book out of it. I did a thing where they would use their bodies to create the letters of the alphabet. So I tried to mix some very basic education with taking pictures. And it was at that point in my life, it was a life-changing experience because I ventured a little bit into doing this kind of social work, but I learned very quickly that the system was going to be really hard to deal with. And at this point, I had met some jazz musicians, so I was seeing another part of a life that I never knew. So, like I said, I met a jazz musician and fell in love. And this was, there was a great venue in Boston next to the camera store that I worked at. And I would go and hear jazz with this group of new, musicians that I had met. And this is still in Boston. And then eventually a few years went on and I moved to New York with one of the musicians that I had met. And that was a big change for me. And this is a lot. This is 1976. I just have to open my notes up 1 second. 1 sec, sorry. Oops.
Deb, can you speak to what it was like to come to New York at that time?
It was really scary because I was coming because I wanted to be with him. It wasn't a dream of mine. And I had tried in Boston at the time, I had tried to work for, I think it was called the Boston Phoenix. I had my little photos, but I was able to get some assignments. I'm just syncing myself up here. Some assignments shooting kids for Radcliffe College and for their alumni magazines and things like that. And then I would shoot bands, for the group of people that I was meeting, and I was waitressing. And then I moved to New York and it was a big change. It was a big change for both of us. He was this is him. Oops. He was a bass player and, it was, he had done as much as he could in Boston. So he was moving to New York and together we went. So I knew one person and she got me a job working at Magnum Photo in the back room, opening up the photographs that came back from the magazines, Lifetime, the big magazines, and I would open the envelopes and I would log them in. And that was my photo education. Looking at all the Magnum photographers' works, and they weren't 8x10, it was big size pictures that were being returned from the magazines. And I don't think you could get a better education or appreciation. So that was that. And then slowly, well, the first job that Scott Lee, my friend, got was shooting Chet Baker. And he was friends, not shooting, sorry, he went on the road with Chet Baker, and his friend owned a record company, and I got to shoot Chet. So that was my first assignment. And this is 1977. And I only knew how to work in black and white, and I was very proficient in the darkroom. And when they asked for color, then I hand colored them with photo oils because I didn't really know how to shoot color at that point. And these oils were actually from the 50s that my dad had used to, you know, take, he was still printing, I guess, and he took pictures of my mom and would oil paint them. So then I started getting a few more assignments from this young and exciting record labels called Artist House. And they were very big on the notes that go with albums and the artwork. And they gave me a lot of photographs. So a lot of assignments, sorry. So this is 1977, Archie Shepp. And I photographed him in the Chelsea Hotel. And I was very shy, which was interesting because most of the musicians were not, they were pretty low key. And I took the pictures, but I just felt like he really wanted me to leave. And normally I probably would have left because I would have felt really insecure. But for the first and last time of my career, I got high with him. And I had a very enlightening experience because I heard a voice, very first time in my life I ever heard a voice. Well, I hear plenty now, trust me, but I heard a voice that said, you don't have to go. In fact, you don't even have to go until you got what you wanted. And that voice has stayed with me at times when I've wanted to leave. And it was, you know, just like the teacher in college, this was also in my mind, the second experience of growth for me, where it was okay to be uncomfortable. It was even okay if they were uncomfortable, but that I could do what I felt I needed to do and have the confidence to do it. So I didn't need to get high again because I kind of took care of it. So I'm still shooting musicians. I don't know if anyone wants to know the years and the names, but I'll just do that. It's the World Saxophone Quartet, 1978. Backstage at the Public Theater, Arthur Blythe, saxophonist. And I was really enjoying myself. I was very inspired by an Italian photographer called Giuseppe Pino. And he shot jazz musicians, but most of the photos that you would see from the 40s and the 50s, a lot of them were shot with this beautiful, you know, hot lights, very sort of classic looking. And I was so inspired by Giuseppe's work because he took them outside of the dark clubs. And it was very freeing for me and very interesting for me to try to find my own voice in that. So I'm trying to think. So now I'm shooting for a magazine called Musician Magazine. I have to check the time because I feel like I'm talking so slow. I'll go faster.
You're good, Deb,
So
you're good.
Musician Magazine, and I'm getting the Musician Magazine did a story on that record company. And then I established a relationship with them and I became their staff photographer for 5 years. What was really interesting about this magazine was that it was kicking ass. At that point, there was Rolling Stone, Crawdaddy, Downbeat, but in each of them sort of had their own sort of genre, if you will. But Musician Magazine was shooting very avant-garde musicians, country western, you know, you'll see it because I have a lot of the pictures, and it was exciting. And it was, so this is Keith Jarrett. And I only found out recently, I didn't really remember where this was from, but he was performing on Saturday Night Live. And so the limo had picked him up, and this is outside Rockefeller Center. Okay, so this is Dave Liebman, jazz saxophonist. So we're still in the 70s. That's okay. Sam Rivers, 1979. And then I wanted to stretch out. I wanted to do everything. So I dropped my book off at People magazine, and this is the letter that I got back.
That's encouraging, huh, Deb?
Yeah, it was really encouraging. But I guess I jumped ahead because I ended up getting a contract with them later on. I must have jumped the list a little. So just to tell you about what my life was like at this point, now I can move quicker. So unlike some of the music photographers who I was so enamored with here in this country, I wasn't going on the road with the band. I wasn't living with them. I wasn't sessioning with them. I was getting 5 minutes to photograph in a record company conference room. And in this case, I could only take pictures while he was having the interview. I couldn't interact with him. And that happened more often than not. So the challenge for me, because everything always presented a challenge, is can you get something that doesn't look like you're in a conference room? So I discovered that this is 1979. I discovered this photo decades after I shot it. I had no memory of doing it, but evidently I followed him out of the record company and out into the street and got that photo. This is just an example of another conference. This is George Clinton. And the party had started with him, I think, decades before I arrived. But this is a conference room photo. And then, this is Prince, 1980. I'm going to go really fast. So I was shooting now for Soho Weekly News. I had an internship at the Village Voice. I'm shooting for Musician and shooting for some other music magazines. I'm mostly, as you can see, only doing black and white. I get an assignment from Soho Weekly News, and they want me to, there's this new guy, it's his first time in New York, he's playing at the Bottom Line, there's a lot of buzz about him, and they want me to shoot the concert. And I'm like, great, because I loved shooting concerts. It was a great place to photograph musicians. And, you know, you'd see all your fellow photo friends there. And so, but then he said, but we'd also like you to go see if you can get some portraits of him too. And then I just choked because again, very shy. And usually when I would shoot someone, the arrangements would be made. And I had to like go knock on the door, and the backstage was literally backstage. So I knock on the door, and guy comes to the door, guess it was his manager, and he's a really big guy. And in a falsetto, I tell him that I've been sent by Soho Weekly News and they want me to take a portrait. Would that be okay? And he says, no, Prince doesn't do that. And of course, I'm incredibly relieved. And I go, okay, thank you. I just had to ask. And then I go back to where I had positioned myself to shoot the concert. And I'm shooting the opening act. It was a comedian. And I get a tap on my shoulder, and the guy whispers for me to follow him. And as we go backstage, he says, you were so nice about that. Come on in and take a few pictures. So I can just tell you that I never really changed as a person. I was always very polite and very grateful and gracious. Much more excited to shoot someone backstage than I was this day. But the room was so small that my back was up against the wall right now. And I'm sure I just had one lens on my knicker mat. So I shot him this way, that way, this way, that way, And then I kind of didn't, that's 9 frames and I don't know what else to do. So I asked him if he'd like to take a picture of me. So that's me by Prince. Okay, so now I'm shooting all different kinds of music. This is the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. And this was in Alabama. And now I'm starting to shoot more avant-garde. And I'm really enjoying this. This is Bill Laswell. It's 1981. I don't have anybody telling me what to do. I don't have any direction. Again, the kind of people I'm photographing like this, they're willing to do what you perhaps might ask or suggest, but I don't know if it was me, but there's not a lot of conversation.
You're
Which
still
I
shy,
probably was
Deb?
really,
At the
what?
time, you're still shy, or do you feel yourself
Oh,
coming out of
God, yes. I'm only up to 1981.
it?
That took decades to get confidence in myself,
Okay.
And so anyway, this is Abdul Ibrahim, 1981 at the Chelsea Hotel. This is Gil Evans. He lived in Westbeth and shot him on a patio somewhere. So this is a great story that I love to share when I do teach my class. And it's how equipment, doesn't have to be expensive. So I get a call to shoot U2, and it's a publicity photo for Island Records. And I live in a little 350-foot square studio, room. And I see that day that it's cloudy and the apartment's really dark and I don't have lighting equipment. So I lived on Greenwich Avenue and I went to the hardware store and I bought one of those metal tin can, a painter's lamp, and I put 100-watt bulb in it. And that's how I shot it. So when I teach, I teach at ICP, when I used to do it in person, I would buy every student one of those reflectors because that was the assignment, to use that. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving on. So this is Brian Eno, and in something like this, I'm trying to sort of understanding as much as I can about his music and the space in between it. And so we're shooting on his roof, and for me, this represented his music as well. I'm starting to learn a little bit about color. Anyway, this is the Cars, 1981. What I like most is walking in and not knowing what I'm doing and what I have and what I can work with. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. So I must have found a mirror or something and had somebody hold it up. So, and sometimes you're just really lucky to be where you are when you are. And for me, this was a case of that. It's 1981. It's Dizzy Gillespie and Chaka Khan singing her version of Night in Tunisia, which was his song. And then this is Musician let me see where I am. Musician Magazine still. I photographed them for the next decade or so. The Marsalis brothers, that's 1982. Oh, and then I guess now I have a internship at the Village Voice with Fred McDara, Sylvia Plahy, and James Hamilton. And that was also a big part of my education and amazing experiences. And
This is
okay, just
Lawrence's thing.
excuse me. So let's see where we are. This is Dwight Yoakam, country Western musician, 1982, Philip Glass. And then I get a job that will outlive me for sure. This is just a compilation of a shoot I did with Madonna. It's 1982. And I had been wanting to shoot her because if you were living in the city at that time, in the early 80s, there was a lot of noise about her, and it just looked really like an exciting assignment. Musician, being a bit of a snob, didn't want to do it. So I, at that point, knew a lot of writers and editors, and I asked one of them if they could get an assignment. So he said, sure. So I shot, I think, 3 rolls of film, but it was 2 1/4, so maybe 36 images. And the shoot was maybe 15 minutes, but she came in ready to go. I had this little, I lived in another little studio apartment, and it was as wide as the seamless, so that fit well. And I guess I didn't have a budget because I don't remember, but I was serving bubblegum and lollipops, which she used, and one of them is a pretty famous photo. But anyway, and then I'm starting to learn a little bit about color. Billy Joel, Todd Rundgren at his Bear Studios, 1983 in Woodstock. Sometimes you get what you get. I didn't get Grace Jones, but I got Jean-Paul Goude, the artist. I got some masks that he had done of her face. So it seems as if I'm the only person who shot Joey Ramone, who really didn't know anything about Joey Ramone, and thought, oh, why don't I shoot him like, you know, the pictures of my mom when she was an infant? No, like Avedon, like, let me do a real classic studio shot. Then I shot him again, and I guess I learned a little more about the band at that point. It's the Ramones, 1983. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah, it's a heavy photo for me.
Where is that?
This is 1983, and there was a group of artists, and they were called the Creative Time, and they did I forget what the word is, but like events on the beach. So this was on the West Side Highway, and they made a beach from the sand from when they dug out the World Trade Center. And I lived in the Village, so we did some stuff in the studio, and then we walked over here to this area and took some photos there. So this is like where the West Side Highway is. And again, this is up on the elevated part for those of you that may not have been around then. So this is 1983, and you know, you could ride your bike where the, what's it called? The High Line. But that used to be my playground. You know, I'd ride my bike, take pictures up there before it was, you know, whatever. So now I'm working for Rolling Stone, and I get a contract with them because they wanted to take me because they were so impressed by what was going on in Musician magazine. So I left Musician and went to Rolling Stone. Although this actually was shot for Musician as well. And this is the only story where someone walked off the set. But in defense of me, I didn't know he might have had an issue with substances. And I guess I pushed him too far because I asked him to move the cape, and the cape knocked my light down and broke my light. And I guess he got embarrassed, so he walked off. And this was the first time I shot on a psych, which I thought was, you know, having not spent much time in a studio, was great fun. This is a German band, the Scorpions, 1984. Okay, I want to keep going. I don't want to keep anybody. Spinal Tap, another conference room shot, 1984. Tina Turner. Okay, so clearly I've learned how to use color and light a little bit. Johnny Lydon. This is John Sebastian in the Village. This is B.B. King. This is Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli, 85. Now I'm working for Us magazine, still doing some music. This is Aerosmith, 85. Tom Waits, Jim Jarmusch had just done a movie together. And then what I loved about working at Rolling Stone was I got to shoot artists, writers, politicians. It was a real game changer for me. This is Bill Gates. Now I'm shooting for Parade magazine. This is 1985. And then I worked quite a bit with Mark Knopfler. This is backstage at Madison Square Garden. And I also did publicity photos for them in Montserrat. And Mark did not like being photographed. And they were recording in Montserrat, and they paid for me to go there and take pictures of the band. So one day goes by, 2 days go by. Oh, just enjoy, relax. Now I'm like freaking out because I've got to leave soon, and I don't have anything. So while I'm waiting, while they're in the George Martin's recording studio, there's this amazing sunset. So I take a picture of the sunset, 2 frames. I hand it in with the film that I eventually did shoot the band, and it was used as their album cover for Brothers in Arms. And sometimes you're just at the right place where all the right people are next to each other. So this was the original Farm Aid that I was shooting for Rolling Stone. So Beastie Boys. This is Jay Gould. Hold on. Stephen Jay Gould, 1986. This is for Vogue, Lisa Bonet. This is Mick Jagger, 1987 for Publicity. Rolling Stone. This is LL Cool J in his grandma's, where he lived in his grandma's basement. Publicity photo, Kid Creole and the Coconuts. This is an example of a shoot that I would really love because I met Paul Schaefer. This is Paul Schaefer, 1987. I met him in Gramercy Park, and while I'm walking there, I see this club called Paul's Lounge, and then I also passed by an antique store, so I ran in, asked if I could borrow the lounge, and that was that. I loved improvising. Oh, I forgot to mention that I didn't really I improvised when I took theater lessons and all that, but the jazz musicians really inspired me by improvising and watching them. And it very much influenced, for me, mentally, my work. You know, being able to be in the moment, see what's there and create something, playing off other people or with them. I don't know, I forgot to mention that. Okay, so this was for Parade or Daily News. I mean, these were great opportunities, which some people would never have taken because, oh, it's for, the Daily News or something. But for me, it was amazing opportunities to shoot some amazing people with some creative art directors. I was never a snob, and I never turned a job down. Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, 1987. This was Rolling Stone. This was the writers that wrote You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. Okay, Cyndi Lauper, 1988, did a cover shoot for Ms. Magazine. She was all wearing lingerie and all that. And this was outside my photo studio. And I asked if I could just take a picture of her as she was when she came in, which I love that. Okay, Frank Zappa, Isaac Asimov, again for the Daily News. Keanu Reeves. I just searched on another computer for the dates, just so in case anyone wants to know. 1989. This was for Us magazine. Howard Finster, folk artist. 1989. Now I'm shooting for Us. This is Bruce Willis. This is Leonard Cohen, Suzanne Vega. Rolling Stone asked Suzanne who was her mentor, and she said Leonard Cohen. They arranged for the shoot. They'd never met until they came into my apartment, my studio. And years later, I had pre-visualized this, which I usually didn't do, that this is what I wanted to take a picture of. And I read years later an article where she talked about how nervous she was because she could hear his heart beating in her ear. It's very touching. Sinead O'Connor. This picture never would have happened. I shot it in Montreal if it were not for my assistant. My assistant forgot to bring the AC cord for my strobes. I don't think I ever would have taken this picture because I could only use daylight at that point. And I wore this jacket to the shoot, but I had this little piece of fabric. And then we just decided at the last minute we would shoot her in my jacket against that. But this was a very, for any photographers, very interesting film. It was a Polaroid film, 35 millimeter. You would shoot it and you would crank develop it right there. It was amazing, amazing film. Okay, Tim Robbins, Yoko Ono. I am going fast. This is that same film, really beautiful. Sheila E., John Cale. So let's just see what year we're up to. Sorry. Okay, 1992. I gotta hurry up. Okay. Howie Long. This might have been for GQ. Oh, and then I was also doing children's fashion at the same time. So I have a few digitized. So this was a little story on hats. I did children's fashion for 10 years. So it was a little story on circus. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, but Deb, how do you go?
What?
How do you go from shooting these celebrities and living in that space to now shooting children's fashion?
You grow up in Cranston, Rhode Island. Your parents never went to college. Your father worked his ass off at something he hated. You never say no to a job. You just be
There you
open
go.
to everything.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So this was jazz musicians and their daughters. That's the man I moved to New York with, but that's not my daughter. I got my own.
Mm. But were you missing that sort of spotlight, Deb? You know, of shooting celebrities?
I didn't have a spotlight. I was just.
Not the
I'm just-
spotlight, but that juice of, you know, shooting, you know, rock and roll.
No,
right?
not at all. Because that's not who I am. And because this was so much fun and exciting. If I wasn't learning something or trying something, then, you know, what was the point of it? You know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
they happened to be celebrities, but they were assignments. You know, I worked off assignments, you know,
Right.
whatever.
Great
I did a
lesson.
lot of stuff.
Great lesson.
Okay. So this is, I got an assignment in 2000 to shoot him, Keith Richards. And I just want to get the year. So there's a British magazine, and all they really wanted was a picture of him holding an album of the man who had influenced him the most, the musician. And this is Blind Willie McTell. And so I did that. And this was in his house. And then I pulled back and I shot this. And then I heard that voice again. And that voice said, well, you've done what the magazine asked you to do, and now you're packing up all your shit. You know, you aren't, your assistants are, and you're packing it all up. And did you really get something for you? And then I quietly walked down a corridor, opened a door, found this room, and asked him if I could photograph him in this room. And he said yes. And then these are some of my favorite photos, by the way, that we're looking at now. So then I was doing a fair number of movie posters at this time. This is 1988. And really quick, I was shooting this high-speed Ektachrome film, and I sort of found my own way of exposing it, and I really loved it. And then, you know, so I got this job to go on the set of Drugstore Cowboy, and basically it was really gray out, and we just walked all around this deserted area. And so the shoot was over, and then the director came over, Gus Van Zandt, and he said, oh, could you just shoot Matt in front of this wall? So I shot Matt there. And then Kelly came running over and hugged him. I snapped it, and that was the cover for the, much like the Mark Knopfler album cover. So this is just a bunch of stuff that I did. And this was even more stuff that I did. And these are book covers that I've done over the last 20 years. And this was a book that I did. Oh, but this is cute. So for my social media, I would take a picture of people reading my book and post it every day. My doctor, my eye doctor, on an airplane, construction workers. And then I'm gonna go really fast. Okay, this is really quick. I'm not gonna say who they are. It doesn't really matter, but I'm gonna tell you that during the last, not the election we just had, but the one before, I was very troubled by what I felt was a lot of quietness up to the election, and that people that normally would speak up weren't being very loud. So where I found people that soothed my soul slightly, who were in opposition to what was about to happen to us, was editorial illustrators, people that were doing those crazy covers for the New Yorker, and they were expressing rage and anger. So I decided to take it upon myself and photograph them. So these are some of the people whose work was really shouting out about what was happening to our country. And I traveled all around photographing them. It's more interesting when you see their work, but I'll just show you the photographs because I need to stop.
And was it hard to make these contacts, Deb?
No, not at all. Oh, if anyone's interested, I can tell you who they are because you might love following their work. This is Seymour Quast, in case anyone's interested. But these people are amazing. And I took it all over the country. I just didn't, COVID came when I wanted to go to the West Coast, so I haven't done that yet.
Wow.
This is in Canada. This is the last one. This is in Israeli collages. Okay, I'm exhausted. I need a drink.
Drinks are coming.
Okay, I'm done. Sorry I took so long.
No, that's totally fine. Deb. Totally fine. Very, very entertaining. And you know, we're all in the chat room loving the work.
Cool. Okay.
So-
Well, thanks
so-
everybody.
Yeah. So Deb, where do you go from here? You know, like do you have
I
a
just answered you in my head, but
Oh,
I
you
won't
can't-
say
you
that
can't
loud.
say-
No.
No, I mean like another project in the works.
Well, I would like to continue the illustrators, to be honest. I'd love to
Yeah.
make it a book with my photos accompanying their work, an image of theirs, with them talking about what drives them to draw.
That's sort of like the Keith Richards shot, right? I mean, similar idea. He's holding the album that inspired him.
Oh, they wouldn't, no. It would be my portrait, but then equally would
Oh.
be their work.
I get you.
Yeah.
Great. And as a book or just as a series, what would you think?
A book that would appeal mostly to artists and illustrators. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's people that publish their work that I probably would go to, but I have more people to shoot. People that feel a great passion about what's happening, what's happened, what could happen, and very powerful work. So that's what makes sense to me right now.
So you have to make a promise when that series is done, you come and show it here first.
Okay, dokie.
All right. See, and this is recorded, Deb. So you know,
Yeah.
I've got proof that you said it.
Okay.
No.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, that and so as you think of a project like that, do you put a time limit on it? Like I'll knock it out in 2 years, 3 years, you know, like how do you work that way? Because the list must be long, right?
No, I mean I have 40 that I've done,
Okay.
but well, I don't know. It's such a weird time in our lives right now.
Yeah.
And I'm in my 7th decade that I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know.
Let's see. Charlie, did you have a question, Charlie? You can put that in the chat.
Yes. This is a question that I've been curious about for a long time because I've been a photographer for a long time, and I never understood this 5 minutes to get an amazing portrait. And when you're getting into a room and you know you have 5 minutes, first of all, that would freak me out just because I know I only have 5 minutes. But do you have like a quick icebreaker that you do? I mean, these are people who are very busy. You've pulled them out of something they're doing and you've got 5 minutes. Probably a lot of them would rather be back where, you know, they were before they were pulled out of a room and stuck in a room with you. And I have just conceptually never been able to understand how that works. Can you give any insight into that?
Well, I have to be honest, if I just look at my own life, that happened when I was younger. So as I grew and became more, so I'm self-taught and there's still a lot I don't know, like how to use my new camera, but Erie's going to teach me that. But that was when I was younger and I have much more confidence now. So really it was just aging into it and taking chances. And there was like, I have a girlfriend and a very funny woman, and she taught me a way of bringing someone in carefully and then making a joke, like, but you know, you didn't have to, you know, if you want. So I'd present an idea and then pull back and then go, you know what I mean? It was just learning ways of dealing with it. Now I'm really not in a position where you know, to be honest, like anyone who I'm taking a picture of is happy to have their picture taken at that point. Cause you know, like fools, they go and look at the website. I don't know. So, but that's, you know, 40 plus years of work.
And do
you know,
do you do research? I mean, you know, read up on the folks that you're shooting before you get there? So you have some background on them?
If I don't know who it is, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I research someone who wants to buy one of my prints, make sure they're not some freak who's gonna make copies of it. I'm researching you right while we're talking right now, Frank.
Is that right? Okay.
And everybody on this panel, I know who you are and where you live and
You're
how much
CIA,
your mortgage is. Yeah.
You're CIA, okay. Well, I didn't use any bad words, Deb.
No, you were very good, and so was I.
Yes. This wasn't.
I mean, without because I also, Charlie, have 2 jokes, but they're horrible and disgusting and vulgar and not correct politically that I always tell. So, and I can tell you.
All right.
You're not.
I'm not doing it now.
I was about to
Not
say the
doing
same
it.
thing to Charlie. I've done so many shoots with amateurs, you know, people that are just looking to put something on, you know, for professional purposes. They just need a portrait of themselves, and it's inevitable. They're really not easily comfortable in front of the camera. They're very uncomfortable. So I know what's going to happen, and I'll just take picture after. Oh, you look good. Oh, you look. All right. We're almost done. It's just one thing I want to do. There's just one picture I want to take. But first, I want to tell you something, and I'll say something like what Deborah was just saying, something outrageous, or I'll say, I just want you to think of your absolute naughtiest thought, your very, very naughtiest sexual thought, and don't tell me what it is. And then I'll take 5 pictures in a row. And it's always one of those 5 that becomes the winner.
That's great bit of advice there. And yeah, we keep on learning as we go. So I cannot thank you enough, Deb, for coming in and doing this. Same thing, you know, Lawrence, you guys were great. And it's a standing invitation, you know, to come back and show us new work and new projects. And if anyone else has any other questions, you know, now would be the time to put it either in the chat room or just blurt it out. But and I have to thank Erie also for making this, for making her you know, give us this connection. She's great. Yeah,
She is great.
Yes. So
well, thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Yep.
And I'm not pitching or selling anything. Just hope you enjoyed it.
There you go. And for everyone that's on who wasn't on before, next week we have some great shows with photojournalists who are in the war zone in Ukraine, who've come back, going back, And these presentations are going to be tough to watch, but I think
Yeah.
everyone needs to see it. And that's not to take any thunder away from Deb and Lawrence, but being that you're here, I just wanted to mention, there'll be email blasts and, about it. So
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, Frank. That's really important, for making
Yeah.
that presentation happen next week. Thank you so much.
yeah, and we have three terrific photographers: Tim Fadek, Peter Turnley, and
Oh, wow. Great.
Alan Chin. So wonderful photographers who, like so many, are putting themselves at risk. But again, not to take anything from Deb and Lawrence, I cannot thank you enough for you guys coming in and doing the show with us. And we look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay,
Frank,
thanks,
I've been on
Thank
guys.
you,
some of these.
everybody,
Good
for
night,
coming.
everybody.
Thank
You do
you.
such a great job, Frank. This is
Thanks,
wonderful.
Lawrence. That's nice of you.